Hello friends, I am Dr. Anjum Rashid. Today I will talk about hereditary spherocytosis. I will discuss its etiology, pathophysiology, symptoms, diagnosis and treatment. Hereditary spherocytosis is the most common cause of hereditary hemolytic anemia and it is characterized by presence of spherocytes in the peripheral blood smear. Now friends, RBC membrane is a dynamic and flexible structure that allows the RBC to undergo deformation which is required for crossing vascular bed and to deliver oxygen. Now any change in the structural organization can lead to loss of function of RBC and cause hemolytic disorder. Now RBC membrane consists mainly of a lipid bilayer which is composed of phospholipid and cholesterol, and in these are embedded proteins that constitute the membrane cytoskeleton. The core layer is hydrophobic and interact with the protein. Now the protein layer consists of integral protein which is band 3 and the peripheral proteins which include spectrin protein 4.1 and chirine protein 4.2. Friends, this is a diagram which represents normal RBC membrane structure. The outer surface is separated from the inner proteins and structures by a lipid bilayer. Now protein defects which are involved in hereditary spherocytosis include band 3 and chirine, spectrin and protein 4.2. Now loss of linkages between the lipid bilayer and the cytoplasmic skeleton composed of spectrin lead to loss of surface area and spherocyte formation. So friend, it is caused by variety of mutation which leads to defect in the RBC membrane protein. Now 75% cases of HS are inherited as autosomal dominant mutation while remaining cases are autosomal recessive or de novo mutations. Now, various genetic mutations have been identified in RBC membrane defects which lead to hereditary spherocytosis. This table explains these erythrocyte membrane genetic defects. The protein involved are enchirine 1, band 3, beta spectrin, alpha spectrin and protein 4.2. Now, most common is the enchirine 1 which is about 50 to 67% of the cases. Now, enchirine 1, band 3 and beta spectrin are inherited as autosomal dominant pattern, while alpha spectrin and protein 4.2 are inherited as autosomal recessive. Now, de novo mutation can also occur in enchirine 1 and beta spectrin cases. Now, enchirine 1, band 3, beta spectrin and protein 4.2 are mild to moderate diseases, while alpha spectrin deficiency is a severe disease. Now friends, I will discuss the pathophysiology. Now the primary defect is the deficiency in red cell membrane surface area, and this is produced by two mechanisms. First is that the density of the membrane skeleton is reduced due to defects of enchirine spectrin or protein 4.2 which lead to destabilization of the lipid bilayer and release of band 3 containing microvesicle. Now the second is the defect in band 3 lead to band 3 deficiency and loss of its lipid stabilizing effect. This results in release of band 3 free microvesicles. Now both these mechanisms result in uncoupling in the vertical interaction of the lipid bilayer skeleton and loss of membrane microvesicle. Now loss of this membrane surface area without a proportional loss of cell volume result in formation of spherocytes which have decreased deformability. There is also increase in cation permeability, cation transport, ATP use and glycolysis. Now spherocytes become trapped in the spleen and undergo further injury due to splenic conditioning. This diagram explains the pathophysiology. Now spectrin and chirine protein 4.2 deficiency lead to the release of band 3 containing microvesicle, while band 3 deficiency lead to release of band 3 free microvesicles. Now because of the loss of this membrane surface area, there is reduced surface area to volume ratio and the erythrocytes are converted into spherocytes. Now these have decreased cellular deformability and they are trapped in spleen. Now spleen has a very hostile environment because it has a low pH. There are increased number of macrophages which are activated, and there is also low glucose concentration and there is high oxidant concentration. Now this leads to hemolysis of these spherocytes. So in hereditary spherocytosis, it is mainly the extravascular hemolysis. Now this hostile environment also leads to further loss of membrane of these spherocytes and lead to formation of microspherocytes, and the whole cycle keep on repeating. Now friends, in addition to abnormal level of proteins affected by mutations, patients with hereditary spherocytosis may demonstrate aberrant distribution of some other proteins in the erythrocyte. Now reduced expression of the water channel protein aquaporin 1 in the membrane of erythrocyte from patients with hereditary spherocytosis have been recognized. These aquaporin 1 content in the erythrocyte membrane correlate with the clinical severity of the hereditary spherocytosis. And other is the RBC antibodies. RBC bound immunoglobulin have been recognized in patients with hereditary spherocytosis who have spectrin deficiency. Now it has been suggested that these antibodies have a pathogenic role in RBC opsonization and removal by spleen. Now, clinically, hereditary spherocytosis show marked heterogeneity. It ranges from an asymptomatic condition to fulminant hemolytic anemia. Now, patients with severe disease may present as neonates, while those with mild disease may not come to medical attention until adulthood. And in this case, usually an environmental stressor uncovers the disorder. Now, during the perinatal period, the clinical spectrum of HS ranges from asymptomatic neonate to severe fetal anemia with hydrops fetalis. Now, during the neonatal period, jaundice is the most common presentation and it is seen in half of the infants. Now, the onset of jaundice is usually within the first few days after delivery, and this is secondary to RBC hemolysis and the inability of the immature liver to conjugate bilirubin. Now, hemolysis is more prominent in the newborn because hemoglobin F bind 2,3-diphosphoglycerate poorly, and this increase in the 2,3-DPG level destabilizes interaction between the spectrin, actin and protein 4.1 in the RBC membrane. Now in children, the classic triad of anemia, jaundice and splenomegaly is present. There is also exercise intolerance, fatigue, shortness of breath and palpitation. Now spleen begins to enlarge after infancy and is usually present in 75% of the cases. Now friends, I will discuss the complications of hereditary spherocytosis. First important complication is the aplastic crisis, which is caused by infection with type B19 human parvovirus. There is increased risk of cardiac failure, infections, bleeding and fatigue. Second important complication is hemolytic crisis. It results from an abrupt increase in the rate of RBC destruction because of the increased splenic activity. So there is worsening anemia and jaundice. Now, third important complication is megaloblastic crisis. It occurs when erythropoiesis to compensate for hemolysis is impaired because of the folate deficiency. Now, patients with chronic hemolytic anemia, they are particularly prone to folate deficiency. Now, onset of megaloblastic crisis is more gradual than that of aplastic or hemolytic crisis. Now, fourth complication is the cholelithiasis. In patients with mild HS, this may be the first sign. Now, these gallstones are usually pigmentary gallstones and these are calcium bilirubinate. They can occur as early as 4 to 5 years, but the incidence usually increases with age. Now, in these cholelithiasis, there is usually acute or recurrent episodes of sharp right upper quadrant or the epigastric pain. And this pain radiates to the right shoulder and is usually associated with nausea and vomiting. And this pain usually occur postparentally, especially after ingestion of fatty foods. And if there is associated cholecystitis, then there may be tenderness in the right upper quadrant and positive Murphy sign. So friends, another important complication is cholecystitis. There is acute severe abdominal pain, vomiting, fever and tenderness in mid and right upper abdomen. And there is occasionally a palpable mass in right upper quadrant associated with leukocytosis. Now, long-term complications include gout, myopathy, spinocerebellar degeneration. Now friends, I will discuss the diagnosis of hereditary spherocytosis. Now, the classic lab findings in HS are mild to moderate anemia, which is about 6 to 10 gram per deciliter, and reticulocytosis. Retic count is usually 6 to 20% and mean is about 10%. Now, mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration is increased and it is usually between 36 to 38 gram per deciliter RBCs, and this is due to mild cellular dehydration. Now, MCV, mean corpuscular volume, is normal or decreased because of membrane loss and cellular dehydration. Now, the MCHC to MCV ratio is usually increased, which is more than 0.36 in hereditary spherocytosis. Now, on peripheral blood smear, N-isocytosis is prominent. There is polychromatophilic reticulocyte and spherocytes. Spherocytes are smaller in diameter and they are hyperchromic, that is, central pallor is less conspicuous. Now, depending upon the severity of disease, spherocytes may be predominant cell or they may be sparse. However, in hemolytic anemia, spherocytes are more than 15 to 20% of the cells. Now, indirect bilirubin is increased. There is decreased serum haptoglobin, increased lactate dehydrogenase level, and direct antiglobulin test, that is the Coombs test for the detection of antibodies on the RBC, is negative in hereditary spherocytosis. This is peripheral blood smear showing many spherocytes. Now friends, I will discuss the diagnostic tests which are used for hereditary spherocytosis. Now current guidelines recommend the use of flow cytometry to screen for hereditary spherocytosis. Now friend, the principal diagnostic test is the eosin 5 maleimide binding test. Another test, flow cytometric detection of RBC osmotic fragility, also show promising result. Then the traditional incubated osmotic fragility test is the most sensitive test but is labor intensive and is time consuming. Now osmotic gradient ectocytometry is another test but it needs specialized instrument and technicians. Similarly, sodium dodecyl sulfate polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis is only available in selected research laboratories. Now genetic testing is the confirmatory test. Other tests which are used are autohemolysis tests or glycerolysis tests, but they are rarely used. Now this is a simplified technique showing evaluation of neonate for possible hereditary spherocytosis. Now I will explain this test briefly. Eosin 5 maleimide test is also known as epithelial membrane binding test. Now, this test uses flow cytometry to determine if the amount of fluorescence reflecting EMA bound to specific transmembrane protein is derived from RBC. Now, the dye predominantly bind to band 3 of the RBC membrane to evaluate protein conformation. The blood sample then undergo flow cytometry and the mean fluorescence intensity is measured. In hereditary spherocytosis, reduction in the band 3 protein leads to decreased fluorescence intensity. Now, the advantages of eosin 5 maleimide binding test is that it needs a very small amount of blood, about 5 microliter, and the blood samples can be tested up to 7 days after sampling. Now, the equipment required is easily available and the test results are available in about 2 to 3 hours. And this test can be used in patients who have undergone recent blood transfusion. Now, the test results will be positive in hereditary spherocytosis irrespective of the morphological findings and the age of the patient. Now, there is a disadvantage of EMA binding test and it is that it is less sensitive for ankyrin defect. Now, incubated osmotic fragility test is the most sensitive gold standard test for hereditary spherocytosis diagnosis. It is performed after incubating RBCs for 18 to 24 hours under the sterile condition at 37 degrees centigrade. Now, osmotic fragility is the degree of hemolysis that occur when RBCs are placed under stress in a hypotonic solution. Normal RBCs are biconcave and maintain osmotic equilibrium by taking in the fluids when placed in a hypotonic solution. While in hereditary spherocytosis, RBCs have altered membrane composition and decreased surface area to volume ratio and decreased capacity of the RBCs to expand, so they rupture easily in hypotonic solution. Now, the disadvantages of incubated osmotic fragility test is that it is labor intensive and time consuming. Now, it is also unreliable in infants who have received blood transfusion. Now, osmotic gradient ectocytometry requires laser diffraction viscometer, which is the ectocytometer. It is used to diagnose hereditary spherocytosis based on RBC shape, viscosity of cytoplasm, and membrane deformability. Now, it needs a blood sample of 100 microliter and it distinguishes hereditary spherocytosis from other hereditary membrane disorders. Now, the disadvantages include that difficult access to the instrument and specialized technicians is required. Second is the blood sample can be tested up to only 48 hours after sampling, and its use is restricted after blood transfusion, and it does not differentiate hereditary spherocytosis from autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Sodium dodecyl sulfate polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis detect the defective protein in most cases. It is useful to distinguish hereditary spherocytosis from other hematological disorders that mimic it, such as congenital dyserythropoietic anemia type 2. Now, it is available only in selected research laboratories. Now, the genetic testing is the confirmatory test for hereditary spherocytosis. It should be done in severe cases of hereditary spherocytosis or in infants with no family history of hereditary spherocytosis. Now, aim of the genetic testing is to provide parents with the genetic counseling regarding the recurrence risk of hereditary spherocytosis in a subsequent pregnancy. Now friends, I will discuss the treatment of hereditary spherocytosis. Neonates with severe hyperbilirubinemia caused by hereditary spherocytosis are at risk of kernicterus, so phototherapy or exchange transfusion should be given. Now, aplastic crises are usually treated with RBC transfusion. Now, folic acid is required to sustain erythropoiesis. Patient with hereditary spherocytosis should take supplementary folic acid for life in order to prevent a megaloblastic crisis. During the first 6 years of life, if the patient has compensated anemia, is growing well and keeping up with the peers in most activity, then folic acid supplementation can be limited to 1 mg per day. Now, splenectomy is the definitive treatment for hereditary spherocytosis. It usually eliminates hemolysis and the associated sign and symptom except in the autosomal recessive form. However, it does not correct the cytoskeletal membrane defects of hereditary spherocytosis. Now, splenectomy may fail to control hereditary spherocytosis due to an accessory spleen, accidental autotransplantation of splenic tissue into the peritoneum during surgery, or another hemolytic disorder, or because of splenosis. Indication for splenectomy include patient with severe anemia, that is hemoglobin less than 8 gram per deciliter requiring red cell transfusion, or patient with moderate anemia, hemoglobin 8 to 11 gram per deciliter who manifest growth failure or other symptoms and complications of hereditary spherocytosis. Now, splenectomy can be referred safely in patients with mild disease. Splenectomy for children with HS should not be performed until the child is older than 6 years to reduce the risk of infection with encapsulated bacteria. Now, an alternative approach is partial splenectomy. It controls hemolysis as well as preserves splenic immunological function. Now friends, after splenectomy, control of symptoms occur. Red cell survival improves significantly but does not become completely normal. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration does not change significantly. Hemoglobin level increases while retic count decreases. Bilirubin level also decreases. There is leukocytosis and thrombocytosis. Now, on peripheral blood smear after splenectomy, spherocytes continue to appear. Howell-Jolly bodies and target cells also appear on peripheral film. Now, in children who had splenectomy, fatal sepsis caused by encapsulated organism, pneumococcus, meningococcus, and Haemophilus influenzae can occur. And most of these septic episodes occur in children whose spleens are removed in first years of life. So, vaccination against pneumococcus, meningococcus, and H. influenzae type B should be given before splenectomy, and prophylactic oral penicillin should be administered after that. Now, if partial splenectomy is done, then splenic function is preserved and vaccination can be delayed until after surgery. Now, for bilirubin gallstones, periodic ultrasonic evaluation of gallbladder should be carried out. And if gallstones are found, then prophylactic laparoscopic cholecystectomy should be done. Now, in patients with gallstone who are candidates for splenectomy, a simultaneous cholecystectomy should be done. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Stay blessed.